find new breakthroughs, whether it's research for energy or what I'm as excited about is breakthroughs for diseases and how incredible that would be if we could find a cure for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or cancer. I mean, it would just be obviously life-changing for those individuals, those caretakers who are going through that, but also the cost savings would be so phenomenal. So it's why I've been a very strong vocal supporter of NIH, of other funding for research development and looking for a cure. And just knowing again, if we could find a cure for Alzheimer's, just how incredible that would be of lives brought back or saved from that horrible disease. And so, and then I'll also, I would say another disease that I would tie into that is opioid addiction. We've been doing a lot on addiction.
We're talking climate
disease.
change.
Climate change was
Not opioid.
yeah, well, I was talking about research, so
We weren't.
I'm done.
This is your last question that I'm going to ask you because we're running out of time.
Of course.
As a background as an attorney, what are your opinions on hate speech and other codes and policies that seek to curb offensive speech? Do you support the right of people to freely voice their ideas in public so long as they don't present an imminent danger?
I do. I support that right. I think it's very clear throughout our Constitution, and to make sure that people can speak freely, but that there's also a responsibility that comes with that when it is causing harm to somebody else or likely going to cause harm to people. The old story of yelling fire in a crowded theater. You don't have the freedom of speech to do that. So there are reasonable limitations. I still support that, of saying let's protect free speech, but also let's make sure that we're doing things that people aren't going to be hurt or threatened or going to potentially put people in harm's way.
What about the football players?
What about Trump, who does it every day?
I'll talk real quick on NFL. I mean, the NFL is it's a for-profit entity, and so
we
again,
shouldn't be in it.
they can do what they want to do.
Yes.
But I think it's up to the people, you know, and different entities if they're going to continue
Why
to
is
support
Trump
them or not. Some people that's a big issue to them. Some people it's not.
He's a piece
I
of
started
shit.
with grateful to our veterans for their sacrifice. To me, the flag is something special. I will
Right.
always stand for our flag.
think it's special
Some people
to
may
all
choose
those
not to.
people.
That's their choice. I don't think we should ever have a law that forces people to stand. We don't do that. We're not looking at any laws to force people to stand. But if it's a private company that's doing it, if it's a private company that says, we hate the flag, we disrespect the flag, I guarantee you, I'm not shopping
That's
there.
not
I'm
allowed.
not going there.
That's
And
not-
that's
that's
quite
not
honestly
what
how I
they're
feel about the
doing.
NFL.
That's not what they're doing.
They're
You know,
not
it's-
doing it for the flag.
I enjoy college football, and I'm going to
The
keep cheering for
protest
college
is not
football.
about the flag. They're not disrespecting the flag. It's Black
Again,
Lives
it's a private,
Matter.
it's not a law.
Stop
It's
spinning.
not something I'm supporting. It's I talked
You're
about.
spinning the issue. It's not the issue.
You didn't answer the question.
All right, I think we've reached the end of our town hall. I know you're disappointed. Randy, would you like to say a few words in closing?
Again, thank you all. Good to be with you. It's clear we disagree on a lot of things. That's okay.
We haven't been able
I'm
to
going to be honest
talk.
with you. I want to continue to hear from you. We want to continue to talk. We're going to keep moving
You're a
forward.
waste of
on
our
this
time.
the best way we can.
We're
I
not-
just want to say
we're not
thank you for
talking.
being here. Thank
You're
you
talking.
for the good questions. And again, let us know. There's people from our staff that are here. If we can be helpful on any
didn't take
issues,
my question.
we'd love to do
None of
that. It's
them.
the favorite thing that we get to do is help people who are
Didn't take
stuck,
any of
who
mine.
don't know what else to do. So please, if there is anything we can be helpful with,
never does.
whether it's veterans
Spin some.
issues, whether it's Social Security, whether
It's
it's
all
pension,
GOP spin.
whether it's immigration, whether it's the IRS, let us know. We'd love to try and be helpful. So thank you all so much. Thanks for being
Your
here.
office hangs up.
We'll move forward as best we can, and that's how I approach every decision on a vote that comes up.
Since there are many people with high deductible insurance plans who often avoid going to the doctor because they can't afford it, what will you do to improve access to quality health care at a reasonable cost?
Well, I talked a little bit about encouraging people to look for other options if they fit for them. That doesn't fit for everybody. But if there is, to look at those other options. I do think we need to do better. It's been, I think, one of the great disappointments of these last months is that we haven't been able to do more of kind of building back up a marketplace of healthcare options. I just believe patients make better decisions for their healthcare than an insurance company does. I just believe patients can make better decisions for their own healthcare than government can. and getting decisions back to patients is what I want to see happen. Making sure that we've got real programs in place for our veterans. One of the things I have supported is this choice program, where a veteran, if they live more than 40 miles away from a VA facility, where they're able to go see the doctors that live close to them, even that created a problem because the bureaucracy was taking so long to pay those bills that it ended up affecting the credit of the veteran. So I sponsored legislation with the Democrat John Delaney, who's running for president in 2020. He and I are co-sponsors on protecting veterans' credit, of making sure that if a veteran takes advantage of choice, their credit ought not be impacted if government fails in making those payments quickly. We've got to protect our veterans. Now we're even, and we pushed in the House, we're waiting for the Senate to act, that all veterans ought to have access to this choice. So that's something I'm supportive of. I still want to see, one last thing that I've done is I sponsored legislation called the State Healthcare Options Act. This is something that we're continuing to work on, but allowing states to have some flexibility. If they feel like they've got ideas where they can create a marketplace for people to have real choices, to have real opportunities out there. I'm also going to continue to push for more transparency in price. I do agree with odd couple, Dick Durbin and President Trump both agree that there's a lack of transparency of prescription drugs. I agree with that. We've got to push, we've got to have more clarity of why drugs are costing so much, why we see this huge increase without any explanation of certain drugs, why people can drive across the border and get drugs so much more cheaply, the same exact thing. We've got to stop that. We've got to make sure that prices are transparent, that we know why things are costing so much, and really getting at the cost drivers of healthcare. That's what I want to see happen.
We are nearing the end.
No.
So, all right. So we've got probably time for a couple more questions. But this next one, why, when you claim to be a STEM and science supporter, do you continue to deny future generations a safe and livable planet and try to combat global warming when you can?
I don't. I don't. I am someone who has voted saying that there is real climate change, that we do have a responsibility. It's something I teach my own kids, that when someone invites us to their house to use their house, we leave it better than we found it. And I think that's what we all ought to approach this world, that we have an opportunity here. Let's leave it better than we found it. We're taking some good steps. There's so much more that needs to happen. And I think the person really helped me with the question there, and it is STEM. It is research. I'm still not convinced that we have the answer to our energy crisis right now, that there needs to be a next breakthrough. I was with a group of scientists down in Chicago last week, I think, that was looking at hydrogen and the potential in hydrogen. There was probably 150 scientists that were there looking at this. I visited Argonne with a group of colleagues, which is outside my district, but a lot of the scientists live in my district. They're doing some incredible work of battery storage. That's our big hurdle. One of our big hurdles right now is being able to store energy that's created because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. But if we could have better battery storage, it makes these things so much more viable. But I still think funding research, and I have been a strong advocate of funding research. I struggled with the omnibus bill that came forward a few months ago. I voted yes. A big reason I voted yes was because there was significant funding in there for science, for research. I also am really proud to be a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus in Congress. It's an absolutely bipartisan caucus that I joined with, you mentioned Perlmutter. There's a different Perlmutter, Ed Perlmutter, who's a Democrat from Colorado. He and I joined that together. It's one of these caucuses that you have to, there's exactly the same number of Democrats and Republicans. But we meet often talking about what do we do? What are real solutions that are going to make a difference for our future? Getting back to that idea of how do we leave this world better than we found it? How do we continue to put pressure on other places that aren't acting as responsibly? China and India, where they're not as focused on doing the right things. And let's make sure we're not pushing companies out of America to go do things in other countries where they don't have the same protection of making sure that we have clean air and clean water and safe workplaces. This is something that I have been supportive of.
This one is about, okay, what are your true feelings about violence against women? Why have you voted against renewing funding to prevent this terrible crime?
I hate violence against women. I will support and have supported the violence against women reauthorization. I think it's going to come up in the next couple of months. There was
You voted
some
against it.
constitutional challenges to one little provision that was stripped out, and then it went forward after that. I think it's something that's so important. It really gets to the heart of what I've been doing on this commission that I'm co-chairman of, the Human Rights Commission, of recognizing that every single person is valuable. No one ought to be abused, and so I'm going to continue to fight for protection for everybody, and seeing again that there's still way too much violence in our communities, but also in our homes. And we need to stop, we need to speak up, we need to come around people who are in a position of danger, making sure that they've got protection and care, and law enforcement is aware, and that they know that there's options for them, that they can be cared for, and true places of
He's not a
safety.
preacher, he's a
And then
legislator. He makes laws.
providing help for them.
To help.
One last thing I would say is
Preach.
doing a lot on human trafficking,
He's preaching.
and doing all that we can to end human trafficking. Breaks my heart that there's more people enslaved today than when Abraham Lincoln was president, and yet it's a reality. Far too much
Breaks
sex
my
trafficking is
heart.
going on.
I'm sure it
25,000, they estimate 16 to 25,000 young women and girls are trafficked through Chicago every single year. That is unconscionable. It's got to stop. We've got to do everything we can to protect them. I've been working with local entities that are doing such great work. There's a place called Naomi's Place in DuPage County that is a safe place. We've got a safe place in my hometown where people can be protected, especially women and children can be protected from violence. We've also so many other issues. One shout out I'll just give, I'm not in Rotary, but I know some people are, and I know it's going to be one of the #1 priorities for Rotary next year internationally is fighting against human trafficking, raising awareness, helping people to be able to escape from this, but then also get care, treatment, counseling, mentoring, a safe place, and help. It's the damage that is done is so deep when this violence occurs, and we need to do everything we can to stop it. And I will absolutely support the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization.
Yeah, you
I
did.
will absolutely vote for it when it comes up,
Again?
and we'll support it as it comes up this fall.
We'll see.
Why did you vote against the last bill?
What if you voted outside the party line on a major issue?
No feedback allowed, I guess.
Multiple times that I voted against the party line on things. There's been many times, whether it's initiatives to increase spending. I mean, literally every week there's things that I vote against what the party recommendation is for us. And so, you know, there's not anybody that I agree with 100% of the time. And so I look at each individual vote, make a decision. But, you know, certainly budgets I voted against. There's things I've spoken out against that the party has been supportive of. But where we see it most often where I'm voting against our party might be where they're pushing funding for certain things that I just think are inappropriate right at this time, certain increases to certain localities or limitations on what government contractor we can purchase from or things like that. I think that ought to be opened up and made more transparent. So those are the areas where I've heard from leadership supporting certain things where I've been opposed.
I was told you vote 96% of the time with the party line.
Yes, and he does.
He does.
It's absolutely on the internet.
Robo-rep.
No, it's,
You got a robot
I'm happy
to your
you know, I don't know what the exact numbers are. What I do vote for almost every week is a journal vote, which is something that
Public
is,
record.
is in that. I know there's
We could have a
group of my
robot
colleagues
do
who
your
every
job.
single week vote against the journal vote, which is again, do the reporters up in front do an appropriate job of taking things down. I think they do, and so that is rolled into that number, which is literally a vote multiple times a day, a journal vote every single day. So you can kind of make the numbers. I would look at the specific things. Again, there's going to be things we disagree on. It's exactly what we started with.
Like everything?
And you know what? If there's more things that we disagree on, you know, that's okay. But I will listen to you. I will learn from you.
But you
I will
won't vote
hopefully
for it
understand
with
your
us.
point of view.
You
I'm
never
still going
vote for
to
it.
gather as much information as I can and make a decision of what the right thing to do is. My focus is always, it's not on what leadership is saying. It's not on what groups in Washington, D.C. are saying. It's what I'm hearing as I'm traveling around the district. We're just in the process of getting a survey back that we're tabulating all the big issues that likely will come up later on this summer and fall. And then it's so helpful for me to see where people are at.
I
Again,
recycled it.
the obvious thing is east front of the Capitol just a month or two ago. You can look at the press conferences there. So I support refugees.
Really
What I want to make
thinks. That's
sure
what he
is
really
that
thinks.
people go through the process.
As a
That would be the last thing I would have said too with reforming immigration, is it ought not take 8 or 10 years for someone to be able to get a real answer of whether they can come to be a part of America. We can get answers back to them much more quickly than
They're
that.
gonna be taken
The
into.
facade drops.
Yeah.
All right. This one is submitted by Richard Lane. What is your position on term limits?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Throw the bums out.
I would support them, and I hope they come up. I would definitely support them for Speaker of Illinois House of Representatives. I've been there 34 years as Speaker of the State House. I think, you know what, we need to do it. I still think the best term limit is an active, engaged electorate where people get out and vote. That's the best thing. But the next best thing is, what I think we ought to be talking about is real term limits. I also think it takes a constitutional amendment, has to pass House and Senate, signed by the President, has to pass a number of states. I think it would. But I think the other thing that really would make sense at the same time is if we changed terms from 2 years to 4 years in the House, have a limit of 3 terms, so you can only serve 12. I'm just saying, you asked me my opinion on it. I'm responding my opinion. So I think some people who've said 3 2-year terms, I think it's too short. I think 3 4-year terms would be enough. 2 6-year terms in the Senate, that's where it's a problem, where you've got people serving 36 years, 40 years, and then 2 term limits as president. We've already got that. So I don't think it'd be that hard to do. Have real term limits in the House, Senate, and presidency.
So who's bringing it up?
And maybe the Supreme Court as
Who's
well.
bringing it up?
I would support term limits in the Supreme Court also.
If you support term limits,
All right, this
why are
one
you
is
running
submitted
again?
by Jerry, and I can't see your last name, I'm sorry. The question is, 3 Mar-a-Lago members have been given unofficial consultant positions trying to guide the VA leaders. What have you done to thwart this quid pro quo?
Well, I'm opposed to any kind of misuse of government to benefit other people. So I don't know the specific 3 people that you're talking about. I do support the investigations that are going on. I want to get real answers. I want to come to real facts that we all can see and make decisions of where we go. If laws have been broken, I will do everything I can to make sure that those laws are enforced where it is our responsibility.
One person is Pearl Mooter, who's head of Marvel Entertainment. I've read these 3 things, 3 people.
If you can get them to me and I'll look at it. I just am not familiar.
Don't you read the paper? Or
I do, but I just haven't read this one.
So here's the next
No
one.
feedback.
The
Can't
tax
have
bill you
feedback.
voted for
Randy gets upset.
was supposed to increase wages for workers, but the latest Department of Labor numbers show inflation at 2.9% and wage growth at 2.7%. The average wages decreased from 1078 to 1076 per hour. How is the tax cut helping lower middle class wages?
I think the biggest thing it's done is create jobs, and it hasn't just been that. It's been so many other things that have been going on where, again, I'm just talking my experience over the last 7 years, where we had
Executive
unemployment
bonuses
that
and
was
stock
very high, near double-digit unemployment, and now we have unemployment that's below 4%. That's unbelievable. That's huge.
Thanks, Obama.
We're seeing wages grow. I hear over and over again people who are encouraged because they're getting career opportunities, not minimum wage jobs, not just entry-level jobs. And I think it is so important to be focused. To me, it's 50,000 is the number I think about, that we need to do as much as we can to create as many $50,000 a year jobs and above.
And raise the minimum wage.
So important. I think it is. It's that opportunity. My son just got hired at a fast food restaurant. He's making minimum wage. He ought to be making minimum wage, but he's got opportunity to move up. And that's, same, I've seen all over the place that there is so, if someone wants an opportunity and they don't know what to do, we can help connect them. We work with community colleges, McHenry College, Lake County College, College of DuPage, Waubonsee, Joliet. All these are just doing phenomenal work of helping people get the certifications that they need. Johnsburg, not too far from here, over in McHenry County, great high school, has a welding class. They've got a commercial driver's license class for seniors. Well, it's actually high school students coming through high school where they can graduate with a commercial driver's license. I'm hearing stories of high school students who are getting $50,000 or $60,000 a year jobs right out of high school and doing phenomenally well. Welders, same thing. I mean, there's full employment for welders right now. And so I think that is what I'm encouraged by, is growing this economy and giving opportunity for anybody who wants to pursue their dreams, that they can have that opportunity. We're a program where people who want to come and work. Our sheriff here, Mark Kern, is a good friend of mine. He's someone who also is very outspoken and vocal on immigration issues, but he gives an example that I think is pretty compelling. And he talked about, at our border we had 2 signs. One was rusty and beaten up and fallen down that says "Do not enter," and then we have another one that's neon flashing saying "For hire." What are people going to follow? We've got to make it very clear that we've got laws in place. We want people to follow the legal process, but it shouldn't take 8 or 10 years for someone to hear if they can become a citizen of this country, if they want to be. If they want to come and work and still be a citizen of another country, and they have something that's valuable to our country, they ought to be able to do that. We ought to have a process to do that. I'm going to keep going through how we've done, just so it's fair for everybody. So that would be another one. So I would say DACA. I would say some sort of guest worker program. We've got to make sure that our borders are working. They're far too porous, especially for drugs coming across the border. I do a lot on opioids and heroin. We see far too many drugs still coming across our border. And we've got to make sure that we're using technology that works to protect our borders. And where a wall makes sense, let's do a wall. I don't support a wall across all of America. We couldn't afford it. It doesn't make sense. There's no reason to do it. So, but we can strengthen it, and I think again it can be beneficial. I think so. I think that's 3 different things. I think a 4th one would be cleaning up our visa system so that we really are allowing people who, again, don't want to become citizens but are coming for seasonal work, for them to be able to do that and then to go back home, that we're tracking that, or that we're keeping good track of that. I think also for people who have special expertise, I have the privilege of representing Fermilab, which is one of our national laboratories, and amazing place, and it is literally a magnet of the smartest people from around the world in physics to be able to come. Many, again, don't want to become citizens of America, but want to come and be a part of this place. And to be a part of the research that's going on, and yet oftentimes they spend a big chunk of their time dealing with immigration rather than doing real research. I think we could streamline that process, make it work better, and have it flow more efficiently for them, where they know the time that they've got, they know when they have to reapply, and when that time comes up, if they haven't been given an extension, they need to go back. And then those who have been here for many years, I talked to some great families who came on visas, had children who were born here, and yet have kind of fallen through the cracks. They're not DACA recipients because their parents came legally. They came under a visa. But there's a real question there that needs to be solved. I meet with many wonderful, brilliant young people who, again, this is the only country they've ever known. We ought to have a process for them to be able to stay as well. So those would be the 5 things that I would say is my priorities.
How about refugees? You haven't included that.
How about
To
changing?
me, that's, I've already talked about refugee program. I want the program to work. I want to increase the numbers. I think they're too small. We're at 55,000.
Children torn from
Sorry, we're not going to do that.
The next question I think will address what you're asking. What steps are you doing aside from talking and signing papers to reunite children with their families? This procedure that was used was so harsh and so cruel to any human being. There was no reason at all to handle these people in the manner they were. The president and anyone else that supported this cruel method of doing this should be brought up on charges for such acts.
I have voted specifically on legislation that we had up a couple weeks ago that would make sure that this would never happen again, that families would be reunited. I did speak out. I did have press conferences. I did do other things, but more than that, I voted. You can look at the record. You can look at the legislation that addresses this issue and make sure it never happens again. This has been something that has been going on for quite a few years, more than 18 months. It has. Look at the history. It has been going on more than 18 months. I just think it's worse than ever. It's got to stop. It's unacceptable whether it's happening now or whether it happened 3 years ago, 6 years ago, 12 years ago. It's wrong. It should stop. Part of the challenge is we've got to push back on the Flores decision, which says that during this process, children cannot be held in any type of correctional facility, which I agree with, but we've got to make sure then that Homeland Security can have this in place. We also have to continue to send the message that parents shouldn't bring their little kids to the border. Let's go through the process. Let's refugee process. We have a process that works. Let's respect each other. I'm trying to answer the questions. Please, let's respect each other. I am.
Yeah, we'll leave them at home, but the babysitter.
I just met 2 weeks ago with Andrew Brunson's daughter and son-in-law. He has been released from the prison, but now is still in house arrest. Still is not allowed to leave Turkey. So we're little steps, baby steps, but we're not there yet. And we're continuing to push the administration to do everything that they possibly can to put pressure on Turkey for his release, but also to make sure that this doesn't happen with other individuals as well.
I'm asking you to only support a farm bill that maintains the Senate provisions that strengthen SNAP. I want my tax dollars to feed my hungry family. Will you be supporting a strong SNAP program?
I'll continue to support a strong SNAP program. We might disagree on what a strong SNAP program looks like. To me, a strong SNAP program is helping people who really have no other options and need the help, with the hope that we're helping them get back where they can be on their feet, or where they can be providing for their own families. Some won't be able to, and that's why we need a SNAP program that absolutely does work, that's there for them. A lot of our frail elderly need these additional tools. I meet with our food banks. We've got phenomenal food banks around this area in Illinois. The Northern Illinois Food Bank is so good. I've had a chance to go there several different times to volunteer, but also to see the work that they do. I've been in other facilities. They've got one in Crystal Lake, not too far from here, but really all over. They're doing good work of making sure that families have access to food, kids have access to food, knowing that if kids are hungry, they're not going to be able to learn. So I want these programs to work, but I also want to encourage people to get back up on their feet, and that is what the House version had was if someone is in a very limited field of certain age, so over, I think it was 25 and below 50 or 55, where they would have to be looking for work or working 20 hours a week. I do think, and I've heard it from people who have been out of work for months after months after months, and the longer you're out of the work, the more difficult it is to get back into the workforce. So I think it is important for us to have programs that are helping people who have no other option, and SNAP does that. I want to make sure it's there for them, but that we're also encouraging people to be looking for work and knowing that part of our confidence and self-value is to work and to be able to be productive. Now again, I know some people will not be able to, and I want to make sure that SNAP works for them. But some people who are able to, who don't have little kids, who aren't anywhere close to retirement age, are able to encourage them to be able to at least start working again, because there's so much opportunity out there. Right now is a perfect time for someone to get back into the workforce, and I want to make sure our programs are encouraging that and helping that.
Would you be willing to support a law that would require members of Congress to fall under the same medical benefit system that the rest of the country is?
Yes.
Absolutely, and we do. This is one of the biggest misinformations out there. I was a part of the Affordable Care Act. We had to be a part of it. The only group that was excluded, and please double check this, was leadership. At the time, the speaker and her staff were excluded from it.
They don't pay the rates.
And I think the speaker now and his staff continues to be under the federal qualified health care, which was a really good program. That was something I was a part of for a while, but we had to get off of that. We had to be a part of the Affordable Care Act, and we were. It was a challenge for us, and I don't say this everywhere, but I'm going to tell you all that our prices went up, our out-of-pocket costs went up. I'm so grateful to have a wife and 4 great kids. But our prices went up pretty significantly. Our deductibles went up significantly.
What are they?
The other challenge.
What are they? What do you pay?
Well, let me tell you. I'll finish telling you what I pay. So our premiums tripled, and our deductibles I think doubled of what we had to pay. So again, grateful that we've got pretty healthy family and things have been going well. But the other challenge that we faced is, since my work is in Washington, D.C., we had to be part of the D.C. Exchange, even though my family lives here in Illinois. And so there was an extra complexity where a lot of the doctors for the D.C. Exchange obviously are in Washington, D.C. We can't fly our family out there for medical checkups and things like that. So we looked at other options. What we ended up doing, one of the things that was part of the Affordable Care Act, was recognizing that there are certain groups out there that are able to pool together. A lot of times it's communities, sometimes it's faith groups that come together, otherwise it's just a community of individuals that can pool together. It's nonprofit, and so we ended up looking at many different options. We ended up joining one that's out of Peoria, that's a group of 100,000 families that come together. So I don't have any federal health coverage. I'm not part of the Affordable Care Act. I'm not part of the federal health whatever. I don't get any health benefit for the work I do in Congress. We pay for it all ourselves. What this does is, it was really I think the original idea of insurance, of people pooling together. It's 100,000 families from all over the country who can be part of this if they choose to. And 11 months out of the year, we pay for each other's health bills. So the maximum amount we would pay each month is $500. It's actually about $495 each month is what we pay. We pay for the first $300 out of pocket for our own care. Anything over $300 is we can submit to the other 100,000 families. We pay cash, so when we go into a doctor's office, we say we're cash pay. Almost always the doctors say, well, if I don't have to deal with insurance, I can do it for less. One of our challenges is many doctors don't know what things cost. They're so tied into insurance. All they know is the Blue Cross code for that. They don't know the cost of it. So sometimes it takes a little bit of work. A lot of times we'll shop around. We'll call several different places if we need to have a test, if we're going to have something done, and we can get it done that way. And then 11 months out of the year, literally we get notified once a month of a family, an address. We write a check directly to them, $495, send it to them. They use that to pay their medical bills. There's never been a situation where someone's bills haven't been paid. Once a month, we pay $495 to the nonprofit for their functioning. They have no TV advertising. They have no multi-million-dollar CEOs that are running this. To me, it's this idea of what insurance was meant to be, of communities coming together and saying, you know, there's 1,000 of us, or 10,000 of us, or 100,000 of us. We know a certain number of us are going to get sick. We don't know which ones, but let's come together and make sure we take care of each other. It's worked great for us. It's not an answer for everybody, but it's there. It fits under, with the Affordable Care Act, it qualifies as health insurance so that you don't get the penalty that was part of the individual mandate.
So that's not all of Congress. That's
not
not
what
all
you
of
do.
Congress.
That's just us. So all of Congress is a part of the Affordable Care Act, except Nancy Pelosi's staff when it was passed. All of her staff was part of the Federal Qualified Health Plan. If there are
But
certain
she's in the
situations.
ACA
She's
now.
leadership.
Say it again?
She's in the ACA now.
I don't think so. I mean, you could ask her, but I'm pretty sure she's still in
Everybody
leadership,
has
so I don't think
ACA
she is. But you should
guidelines
ask
on
her.
insurance.
I am not. I could not be part of the federal health plan. They would not let me. I had to get out of that. We went on the Affordable Care Act for about a year and a half, and then we left that to do this other nonprofit.
Just your
work.
family. Just your family.
Just my family. I get no health benefit from the federal government.
Just the rest.
But you're religious.
Here we go. If you could wave your magic wand, what 5 things would you put in the immigration reform bill?
Well, I think it is solving DACA, the Dreamers. These are people who are brought here with no choice of their own, brought here by somebody else, usually a parent, usually a loved one, making sure that they can stay, that there's no threat for them being deported, that they can work and pursue their dreams, and ultimately that they can become citizens of this country. I think the other is this idea that everybody ought to have an opportunity to be here, and I think it gets back to, as I travel around the district, the biggest concern now is finding qualified workers, people who are willing to show up, people who will work, put in a hard day's work, that there is great opportunity. I hear businesses almost every week who say, we tell our employers that if they'll come work for us, we'll pay for their college, we'll pay for their education. And I think that's a great double solution of getting workers, giving opportunity, but also making sure that people aren't saddled with huge college debt. if they get out, once they get out of college as well. Plus, they've got real work experience and resume builders. So I see it living within our means, having real appropriations process go through, and keep this economy growing. It is so good on so many different levels. And CBO has just come out with some recent numbers. Again, the Congressional Budget Office coming out and saying that growing economy solves so many problems, and it is paying for a lot of the other challenges that we're facing when we're seeing this growing GDP.
It really isn't.
This is from Russ Bennett of McHenry. Regarding the human rights violations of the government of Turkey, are any additional measures available to gain the release and repatriation of Andrew Brunson?
I hope so. We've had multiple hearings. I'm co-chairman of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission in Congress. We've had multiple hearings on abuses specific to Turkey, the Erdogan administration, and often cases, the police state that we're seeing there, this absolutely wrong imprisonment of Pastor Andrew Brunson, who has some ties back to Illinois, who went to college at Wheaton College. Just an amazing person. I've met with his daughter and son-in-law a couple of different times. I'm also on the Helsinki Commission. We've had hearings there as well. I think it is continuing to put pressure on Turkey, looking at sanctions on Turkey, making sure that they're not getting access to military equipment of ours. So these are important things. Some of the things that the president has done. I want to hold China accountable, but I also want to make sure we're protecting our farmers. They're not looking for a handout. They're looking for an opportunity to be able to sell their soybeans in communities. And again, that shouldn't necessarily be a part of this intellectual theft focus that we need to have and make sure that we stop.
This one is submitted from Owen Merck of Crystal Lake. As someone who doesn't remember a time without the internet, I see the web as the ultimate American dream. A website, no matter their capital or funding, can get traffic if they merit it. How can this be preserved with the repeal of net neutrality?
Well, it's still going now. The internet is functioning well. I was just on it this morning, and this change has happened. There was a lot of people know so much about net neutrality, and many don't. There was a change back 4 or 5 years ago of doing away with Title II, I think it was Title I or Title II, of who would ultimately be responsible for overseeing and stopping abuses or limitations of people's access to the internet. And so it was really, there's a battle between the Federal Trade Commission and the Federal Communications Commission, FTC and FCC. It's a turf battle that has gone on for a lot of years. And there's a lot of concern over whether, if this is taken away from the FCC, where it was switched a few years ago, and brought back to the FTC, would it put additional higher prices for people who just want to start up an internet business or whatever? I've studied this. I've talked to people. I've talked to entrepreneurs who have started businesses. They still see great opportunity there. I still believe the FTC is the right place for this to be overseen. They can put real penalties on violators, people who are abusing, limiting access, giving access to certain entities and not to others. And they can institute fines that can go back to consumers. FCC is not able to do that. The other thing that I still do think is important is that there's, our lives have changed, and the access to our information, especially medical information. If, God forbid, one of us were in a horrible car crash and we're a little ways away from our hospital or doctor and went to get care, we want to make sure that emergency room is able to get access to our information as quickly as possible. I think it does make sense for there to be some high-speed channels of access of medical information between medical institutions. And I think that is something that is possible under the current state of affairs where things are at this morning. Again, this has changed in the last couple months. I think most people haven't noticed any difference in how things are working in their own access to the internet.
James Martz submitted this question. If we had a constitutional amendment to balance the budget, how would we do it if we continue to give tax breaks to the 1%?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be all supportive, completely supportive of it. I think, the way you balance the budget, it's twofold. One is to stop spending money we don't have, to have
Right.
real appropriations processes
give
that
you
go
away.
through the House and Senate and onto the President. That hasn't happened. We've been living under continuing resolutions for the most part. We've passed a couple budgets. One of them was an idea that I had pushed when I first got elected, still support the idea that if we don't pass a budget, members of Congress ought not get paid. Our pay ought to be withheld until we pass a budget. I think it's that fundamental as far as the responsibility that we have as members of Congress. And it's an accountability tool that the voters have to be able to look and see, are we doing what we said we're going to do? So it is living within our means. We've passed appropriations. We did it in the House this year, the quickest it's ever been done, of passing all 12 of our appropriations bills through the House. The Senate only has passed one package. I think it had 3 different appropriations, so 3 of the 12 that they've done. So we need help there. The other thing with having real appropriations, that is living within our own means, recognizing that families, we can't spend money we don't have, that we've got to live within our means. Government and federal government ought to be doing the same thing. I think the other thing that's really important is a growing economy. And we've seen just how phenomenal the growth has been over the last months. Just a couple of years ago, we were being told that we will never, it's unrealistic to think we'll ever get above 2% growth again, that the new normal is somewhere between 1.5 and 1.9% growth. Well, now we're averaging well over 3% growth this year so far.
We
This
did in the
last
past,
quarter, we were
too.
over 4% growth. As I travel around, again, the biggest change that has happened in the last 8 years is, as I go around, I heard over and over and over again as I was running back 8 years ago, of the number of people that were unemployed or people who had a couple part-time jobs trying to find a way to get to the end of the month, to start all over again, to do the same thing the next month. As I travel around, so many people are working, so many people are working in jobs that have career-paying opportunities, which is absolutely what they want, and we want to make sure that they can have going forward. So we need to make sure that we've got policy that continues to allow this economy to grow, to provide opportunities for all. One of my heroes is Abraham Lincoln, and one of the things he talked about quite a bit was this idea of the right to rise. That it's not a guarantee that everybody's going to reach a certain level, but we all ought to have that right, that that ability to pursue our dreams. And I honestly think we're seeing that when we see the lowest in recorded history of our economy, the lowest level of unemployment for African Americans. It's still too high. I still want it to be lower, but it's the lowest we've seen in history of recording these numbers. That's awesome. Same with Latinos, where it's the lowest number of like that. We're certainly seeing a challenge right now with the great upside of a growing positive economy. The reality is we've got more job openings right now than we have qualified people looking for jobs. And so I just was meeting with someone walking in of the challenge to be able to hire people to fill the jobs that are available. And so we need to do more there. I have been supportive of DACA recipients being able to stay, being able to go through a process of receiving their citizenship. They've already proven, if they're part of that, that they haven't committed crime, they haven't committed misdemeanors that would disqualify them. They're going through the process of getting schooling. I think we ought to be able to solve that. I'm frustrated that we've been stymied, quite honestly, on both sides on that. Some of my very conservative colleagues voted against it. All of my Democratic colleagues voted against it. My hope is when we get back, we'll have a vote again to be able to bring certainty back. I've met with multiple DACA recipients throughout my district and am so impressed with these young people who, again, just want to be a part of the country that this is the only country they've ever known. This is the only language that they know. And to have that certainty for them to be able to stay here to work and be part of the American dream is something that I want to see happen. And I'll continue to push for that, continue to support that. I do think, I talked about before, that I want to make sure that our refugee programs get working again. They are so many are being rejected right now. We've got a certain number of slots. We're not anywhere close to filling those slots, and I want to see what we can do to change that and make sure that this is a place of refuge for people who need that, who are threatened in the countries that they're in. What was the other part of that question? China. China is a real threat. China is not a friend. They don't like us. They want America to decrease. They want to steal intellectual property from us. And I serve on the Congressional Executive China Commission, and we hear almost every week at hearings of continued abuse and persecution and imprisonment that goes on there. I've adopted a Chinese prisoner, Zhu Yufu, who has been in prison because of a poem.
This question is submitted by Joan Davis of Huntley. Thank you for your question. I'm especially concerned about how our country continues to suffer unprecedented gun violence. I recognize the Constitution protects gun owner rights, and the NRA is a huge lobbying organization. But why can't we get some sensible gun legislation laws passed, supporting Americans' more basic right to safety?
I absolutely agree with the concern of gun violence and violence in general. I mean, it is so sad to me. I mean, I'm sure many of you saw the news where 71 people were shot in Chicago last weekend. 71, I think it was 10 or 11 deaths in one weekend in Chicago. Almost all handguns, almost all gangs. You look at the numbers, there's 33,000 known gang members in Chicago. I represent St. Charles, Illinois, a great town, pretty good sized town. 33,300 people live in St. Charles. So almost the identical size of a town like St. Charles is the number of identified gang members in Chicago. We've got way too much gun violence, and we've seen it spill over horrible, horrible tragedies in our schools, in our communities, in churches. I hate this. It's got to stop. Literally, every single day. I am
Do something.
thinking about.
And do something.
Well, let me
Ban
say.
assault weapons.
Chicago, let me go back to what we started with.
Jesus.
Chicago has the toughest gun laws in America, and yet they had 71 shootings, literally 1 an hour. One person was shot every single hour in Chicago last weekend. So absolutely, let's have responsible gun
Ban
laws.
assault
But let's do
weapons.
better.
Ban
Hey,
assault
remember we talked-
weapons.
You can, we'll take your questions, and we'll take them one at a time.
You're not answering them.
You're not answering the question.
You're not answering the questions.
Can you read the question again?
Oh, please.
I am especially concerned about how our country continues to suffer unprecedented gun violence. I recognize the Constitution protects gun owner rights, and the NRA is a huge lobbying organization. But why can't we get some sensible gun legislation laws passed, supporting Americans' more basic right to safety?
I do support Americans' basic right to safety. We've supported funding to go directly to schools, knowing that a school in Naperville is going to have different challenges than a school in Marengo or up in Harvard or Hebron. They ought to be able to have individual plans. One size fits all doesn't make sense. I still believe in the Second Amendment. I believe we ought to be better at taking guns away from criminals and not so focused on taking guns away from law-abiding citizens. I'm all for everything that we can do to make sure that laws are enforced. If I'm hearing from law enforcement that laws are inadequate for them to be able to do their job, I absolutely will support additional laws that will allow them to be able to do their jobs.
When? That's not an answer. When?
Immigration
20
is an
years?
important issue. What are your views on a wall? And what are your views on China as a threat?
Immigration is a big issue. I do think we need a border security focus. A wall is a part of it. A wall doesn't make sense across the entire border, but I do think there's other technologies and things that can work to make sure that we're doing, again, the same that every other country is doing, of knowing who's coming in and out of our country. We also have to improve our visa system. The reality that 30% or 40% of the people who are here without documentation came legally but overstayed their visas. That's a failure on our part. We've got to do better with that. Keeping up with who those people are, letting them know that their visa is expiring, that they need to either leave or get an extension on their visa in 60 days, in 6 months. And so there's got to be better follow through on that. I also think we need to do better on having programs where people can come who don't necessarily want to be citizens but want to work.
I'm going to stand over here too. How do you justify keeping silent when the integrity of our country is under attack?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what the questioner means. I have not kept silent. I've been very outspoken of areas that I agree with the president and the administration, areas where I agree with our own leadership. I've also been very outspoken on areas that I disagree with them. Some specifics, I was very outspoken with the initial executive order that the president made. Is this all right? I'll just hold it closer. Maybe that'll be better so doesn't have to be turned up so much. With the executive order that I felt like was targeting certain individuals, religions, faith. I am a passionate supporter of religious freedom. It's a big reason why my great-grandparents came to America back in 1900 was for religious freedom. I still believe it's a cornerstone principle that if you don't have religious freedom, it's a fundamental freedom, and we need to protect that. I still think we do have a responsibility to know who is coming in and out of our country, and if people are coming to do harm, we've got to do everything we can to keep them from coming into our country, protecting our borders, protecting our security, just like every other country does in the world, of having a process to be able to know who's coming in and out, making sure that we are a place that is still accepting. The other area that I have disagreed with, this administration and this president, and quite honestly, the previous administration, has significant reductions in refugee programs and access of people to be able to find refuge in America. I think these programs have worked, can work, should work. We can know, again, if someone is coming here to try and do harm, and we can keep them from coming, but the vast majority of people who are going through the refugee process, not at the border, but going through while they're in their country or other places, going to our embassy to start this process, vast majority of them just want a place where they can be safe. I've had an opportunity to meet with refugees throughout the 14th Congressional District. Probably 8 months ago, had a great chance to meet with a whole group of them down in Yorkville, Illinois, down in Kendall. Phenomenal people who loved their country, didn't want to leave their country, but felt forced because they were not secure, they were not safe, their family and children were not safe, and they had to find a place of refuge. They're working so hard. Till morning for about 1 minute, so almost good noon. Welcome. Welcome to Wauconda. So glad you're here. It really does mean a lot to me that you all take time to be with me. And my focus today is just to talk with you, to be able to hear from you, to hear what's on your hearts, minds, thoughts you have, suggestions you have. And so I'm not going to do any kind of opening statement. We're going to get right to questions. If you've got questions, please write them, give them to one of our staff who are around. Beth is going to be reading off the questions so everybody can hear them, and then I will respond quickly so we can get through as many questions as possible. Just again, 30 seconds at the beginning. Welcome, so glad you're here. Any way we can be helpful, we want to be helpful. So please let us know. It's the favorite thing we get to do is actually trying to cut through red tape or help people with the challenge or struggle that they've got. And that's why staff is here. They're going to be here. They're going to follow up. One last thing I'll say is I know as we go around, we're not going to agree on everything. That is the power of democracy, is the idea that we don't always agree on things, but we respect each other enough to listen. And that's my goal today, is to listen to you, and I hope we can respect each other as well, knowing that there's going to be differences of opinion. That is so important, and it is something, on the way in, I was here 3 years ago on September 11th at the dedication of the 9/11 memorial here in Wauconda. Phenomenal memorial. If you haven't seen it, please, when we're done here, take 5 minutes to walk over there. It's so moving. I had the privilege of going to high school with Todd Beamer. I saw Todd's name he was on Flight 93, one of the passengers that stormed the cockpit there. And I just was even thinking about that, looking at his name, that pretty much positive that everybody on Flight 93 didn't agree on everything, but they agreed that they had a common mission that day. And I'm confident that their work saved the U.S. Capitol, that plane was heading there. And so grateful, again, for heroes that were on that day, but heroes that continue. Also grateful to be in this place. And to our veterans, to families who have veterans, spouses of veterans, parents of kids who are serving or grandkids who are serving, thank you. We are so grateful, and that's what that memorial is all about. So welcome. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Beth Goncher. We had someone who was going to be reading questions. She was feeling ill this morning, so Beth is going to step in to handle questions, and then I will be limited in my time of responding to them so we can get through as many as we can. So thank you. Welcome.
Who cares?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, Randy, your first question here is, what is your opinion on Trump Care versus Obamacare? And what is your opinion on Medicare too?
Well, let me start with the end one. Medicare, I am 100% supportive of Medicare. I want it to work. I want to make sure it's there. I want to make sure it's growing, and that it's not just Medicare, but it's accepted by doctors, that people can actually go in and see their doctors. I haven't really seen a complete plan from President Trump. There has been some plans that have been presented in the House, presented in the Senate. There's not one that I agree with 100%. What I do want to see is real options for people. I want patient-focused care, not insurance-focused care like we've had, not government-focused care like we have, but patient-focused care. And I think the goal that we do there is really building back marketplaces where people can have choices and options, where there's not just one insurance company, which is the current situation, where there's really only one for the vast majority of Northern Illinois. That's not a choice. That's all you've got, and it's take it or leave it. We've got to get back where we can have real choices, real options. I also want to make sure that we've got this knowing, sorry, I don't want to stand at the wrong spot. I'm going to move around to try and get out of, I'll find a good spot. That's not it. Somewhere here. I'll stand still. So the other thing is pre-existing conditions. I want to make sure that people are confident with that they're covered, that if they've got pre-existing conditions, they're not going to be kicked off their insurance because they have those pre-existing conditions. That's something I've been very supportive of, spoken out for. We'll continue to fight for that, whatever next steps we take, making sure that that is a part of it, that people with pre-existing conditions are cared for. And like I started with, making sure that our seniors have care, that they can see doctors. One last thing I'll say is making sure our veterans get the care that they need. There's been some great work with the VA. We're fortunate here in Northern Illinois with Hines and with North Chicago, the Lovell facility. They really are excellent. They've even become better over the last couple of years. We need to keep improving. We need to keep getting better there, making sure that everybody not only can get coverage, but can get care, and that they can get health care that they can afford, that they can feel comfortable with, where they can make choices where it really fits them, and it's patient focused.